Welcome to week 3 summary for the online course Fundamentals of Electronic Materials and Devices. In week 3, we will focus on extrinsic semiconductors, which is the form in which most semiconductors are used widely. An extrinsic semiconductor is one where we have a controlled addition of dopants. You can also call them impurities, and these dopants change the carrier concentration and consequently the electrical conductivity of the semiconductor. So dopants will preferentially increase either electrons, in which they are called donors, or n-type dopants. They can also preferentially increase the concentration of holes, in which case they are called acceptors or p-type dopants. Again, we will use silicon as an example to explain the concept of doping. So earlier we saw that silicon has 4 bonds because of the sp3 hybrid orbitals, and this here is just a two-dimensional picture of the bonding. When we replace a silicon atom with an arsenic atom, there is an extra electron coming from the arsenic, which basically means that arsenic is an n-type dopant. On the other hand, if we add boron, we have only 3 electrons from boron, which means there is an electron vacancy or a hole, in which case boron is a p-type dopant. Similarly, for other semiconductors, we can define n-type or p-type dopants. So we choose the dopants in such a way that the energy level is close to the band edge. If I want extra electrons, so remember in a semiconductor, electrons move in the conduction band. We need to choose a dopant whose energy level is close to the conduction band. Similarly, in the case of p-type semiconductors, we want a dopant whose energy level is close to the valence band so that the electron is promoted to the dopant level and we have extra holes in the valence band. So typically for silicon and germanium, we have a set of materials that are used for dopants. And more importantly, the energies are in such a way that at room temperatures, the dopants are completely ionized. This is again very important when we come from a practical application aspect. So let us look at this pictorially. So again, we have silicon. We have arsenic, and I already told you arsenic is an n-type dopant, it's a donor. So its energy level is close to the conduction band edge. We also said that at room temperature, all of the dopants are ionized, which means if I have 100 arsenic atoms, each one is going to give me 1 electron, or I'll have 100 electrons in the conduction band. So the concentration of electrons in the conduction band is just same as Nd, where Nd is the dopant concentration. In any semiconductor, product of N into P is equal to Ni square, which means P is Ni square by Nd, and typically this number is much smaller than N, which is why we say electrons dominate the conduction in the case of an n-type dopant. The opposite is true in the case of a p-type dopant. So P is equal to Na, and the concentration of electrons is much smaller than P. Sigma equal to Ne mu E plus Pe mu H is the general conductivity equation. In the case of n-type dopants, this term only dominates because N is equal to Nd and P is much smaller. In the case of p-type dopants, this term dominates because P is equal to Na and N is much smaller than P. Now changing the concentration of electrons or holes preferentially will also change the Fermi level position. In the case of an n-type semiconductor, the Fermi level moves up, so it is closer to the conduction band. On the other hand, for a p-type dopant, the Fermi level moves down, which means it is closer to the valence band. We have seen earlier that the Fermi level to the vacuum level is called the work function of the material. So N-type dopants decrease the work function of the material, while P-type dopants increase the work function. So there will be situations when we have both donors and acceptors in the same semiconductor. So later when we talk about devices like say diodes or transistors, the way we make them is by taking a semiconductor which is already doped and adding either donors or acceptors as the case may be. If I have both donors and acceptors, it is called compensation doping, and the one with the higher concentration will tend to dominate. This we can see by writing what is called a charge neutrality equation, which says that the net negative charge must be equal to the net positive charge. So if I have a situation where Nd is greater than Na, donors are greater than acceptors, I have a N-type semiconductor. If acceptors are greater than donors, I have a P-type semiconductor, and if both are same, then I'm back to an intrinsic semiconductor. Doping not only changes the electrical properties, it also changes how the electrical properties behave as a function of temperature. For most extrinsic semiconductors, we design the semiconductor in such a way that at room temperature we have saturation, which means the concentration of dopants is more or less a constant. This means that the electrical conductivity will also be a constant and will not change as a function of temperature. We normally define three regimes. One is called the ionization regime. This happens at low temperature where the donor level is not fully ionized. Once the donors are fully ionized, we are in the saturation regime, and silicon at room temperature is in the saturation regime. As I said, we engineer the material in such a way that we reach saturation at room temperature. If I take the same extrinsic semiconductor and heat it beyond room temperature, at a certain temperature called Ti, above it, the semiconductor behaves as intrinsic because all my donors are ionized, and now I have extra electrons coming from the valence band. Doping will also affect the carrier mobility. So carrier and they move in the semiconductor get scattered. So if we have defects or if we have dopants, then these will tend to scatter more, which means the mobility will decrease. So this is true in the case of both electrons and holes, where we find that as the dopant concentration increases, the mobility of both of these decreases. And we can actually calculate the net mobility by considering both the lattice scattering and the impurity scattering, and this is called Mathiassen's rule. We also have a situation when if you dope a large amount of dopant, so whether it's N-type or P-type, at large dopant concentrations, the impurity level, so remember the impurity level is close to either the conduction band or the valence band. At large dopant concentration, the impurity levels merge with the bands, and together we have a situation where we have a continuous band either close to the conduction band or close to the valence band. These are called degenerate semiconductors. In the case of degenerate semiconductors, the behavior is metallic. So rather than electrons getting excited from the valence band, the conductivity is dominated by the excess doping of the semiconductors. So degenerate semiconductors, the conductivity decrease with temperature. Another extreme form of semiconductor is amorphous semiconductors. Most of the semiconductors that we saw earlier were crystalline, which means they had no defect states, and conduction only happened in the valence or conduction band. In an amorphous semiconductor, we talk of localized defect states, and conductivity is by a different mechanism called hopping conduction. So with this, from weeks 1 to 3, we have looked at some of the basics of semiconductors. We started off with the free electron gas model, talked about intrinsic semiconductors, and then moved on to extrinsic semiconductors. In the next few weeks, we will look at forming devices by combining different semiconductors and also looking at junctions of semiconductors with metals.